Mary Moller, who is a 3-time U Albany alum. Yay! And her current claim to fame is that she's the executive director of the Albany Guardian Society. So I'm going to let her introduce our authors.
Hey, thanks, everybody. Okay, so it is a real privilege to be here tonight with all of you, and a real honor to welcome these esteemed, these fantastic U Albany alumni, and then these just brilliant authors. So first, I'm going to hold up your books. How to Be Old, Dr. Lyn Slater, if you want to come up, and then I'll read your bios. Lessons in Living Boldly from the Accidental Icon. And then the other fantastic author tonight is Sari Botton, and you might find yourself Confessions of a Late Blooming Gen X Weirdo. So I will sit, and I'll start with your bios, and it's my understanding that we'll do some questions for the both of you with Linda and I, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, okay? And if anybody has any comments, just write them down, because we've got some good questions, but I'm sure you also have some equally good questions. So let me start with Dr. Lyn. So, Dr. Lyn, tracing her path from studying social work and serving as a scholar and professor, Dr. Lyn evolved into a fashion blogger and influencer, and now an author, bringing with her insights about what it means to grow older. This memoir, How to Be Old, is a thoughtful look at aging, style, and selfhood. From launching her blog, Slater reflects on her 60s as a time of transformation, visibility, and challenging societal norms. And we social workers, right? We love that. Okay. And then, rather than resisting the passage of time, Dr. Lyn embraces it. Gray hair, shifting values, aging bodies with boldness, creativity, and honesty. The book calls us to reimagine what living fully later in life looks like, making errors, staying true to yourself, drawing boundaries, nurturing relationships, and refusing invisibility simply because the years go by. Wow, how wonderful. Okay, then, Sari Botton's. Now, I'll read this, and then we'll ask questions, and then you'll get to hear our fabulous author speak. And you may find yourself, Confessions of a Late Blooming Gen X Weirdo is a memoir in essays that's powerful and honest, explores what it means to grow up, to feel like you don't quite fit, and finally, to speak your truth. Across her life, childhood, relationships, work, body image, feminism, aging. Botton weaves a narrative with self-awareness that is both gentle and inclusive. Takes the idea of late blooming that sometimes finds your authentic self happens long after others assume you've already done so. What makes this memoir especially moving is that it does not present a picture of perfection. It shares stumbles, false starts, messy middle, and the small, steady growth. We're reminded it's never too late to lean into being more fully who we are. It's a call to embrace who you are, even when you think you might be behind, even when you feel like a misfit, to treat yourself with kindness, to live with honesty, and believe that self-discovery is possible at any stage of life. Wow. Okay, first question for both of you. Okay, so you both talk about aging not as something to resist, but something to own. So what does owning age mean to you practically, emotionally, especially in our social media digital age?
I publish a magazine on Substack called Oldster. And I'm using the word oldster kind of tongue-in-cheek, but also I'm reappropriating what was kind of a slur and using it to say, you know what, everyone gets older. And I'm trying to normalize and destigmatize aging by showing that it's happening to everyone, regardless of gender or age group. I cover people from all ages. And, you know, I really feel it's important to redefine what aging is. There are so many bad misconceptions about what it means to be certain ages in this culture. And a lot has changed. You know, we're not doing age the way our grandparents did or our parents. The boomers were the first to change all the rules. And so I think it's important to own your age, but also say that, you know, to stand up and say, I'm not what you assume someone my age is. And, you know, we're saying it to young people, we're saying it to our peers, and we're saying it to people older than us. We're saying, I'm here, and I'm a full person, regardless of the number associated with who I am. And by the way, I just turned 60 last week, and even though I publish a magazine about getting older, and even though the contributors and commenters are always telling me how much their lives improved after 60, after 70, after 80, I had taken in the societal message that 60 is ancient, and I was freaking out about it for like a good year. And, you know, then it happened, and here I am, and I'm 60 and 6 days, and everything's fine. You know, everything's really fine. I'm still me. And, yeah, so it's we all need to rethink aging and accept where we are, and also, though, stand up and say, I'm not just my number.
So much in that. I think, you know, aging, your age is a very complex thing because we have our chronological age, which is our number. We have our subjective age, which here is, I think, the most interesting part, which is how old do you feel inside? And for me, this is very fluid. So I can wake up tomorrow, I could feel like I'm 85, or I could wake up and I could be listening to the Rolling Stones and all of a sudden I'm 25 in my subjective mind. And then there's societal age, which is the age that society puts on you or how they construct your age. And so I think owning your age means, number one, to be fully aware of the way that you are being constructed by society to be a certain way simply because of the number of your age. And so I think for me, I have to say, Sari, as I'm now in the 70s, and 60 was quite young.
But did you feel it like it was young when you were turning 60?
I have to be honest with you, I was never someone who was attached to age. And so I think that's an interesting question for me because in my 60s is when this whole accidental icon thing happened. And to me, all I was doing was something I had done my entire life, which was I'm interested in learning about something new. I'm going to take a class in a fashion school instead of getting my PhD. You know, in my 20s, I was here at SUNY Albany doing criminal justice. In my 30s, my MSW. In my late 40s, early 50s, PhD. So I've always been someone who was just curious and wanting to learn, which has no age, right? So for me, owning your age is being realistic because there are some real challenges that get presented to us. Health, mobility, just financial
Loss.
a whole lot of different things, but you can still be aspirational. And I think for me, that's the key to owning your age, being 100% realistic about what you're facing, but being aspirational and still having hopes and dreams.
I love that. Can I just add also, one of the features of Oldster Magazine is every Wednesday I have the Oldster Magazine questionnaire, and I feature somebody, and I think you took the questionnaire. Did you take the
I
questionnaire?
think I did.
Yeah. And the second
Memory issues,
I know,
too.
both of us. The second question on the Oldster Magazine questionnaire is there another age you associate with yourself in your mind? And if so, why? So and then The Atlantic did a piece about that, about the internal age, and they quoted me in the article. It was by Jennifer Senior. So it's a real thing.
It is a real thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do really appreciate, I think ageism, that's one of the reasons we have the Internships in Aging project, is because people have so many preconceived notions about what it means to be old or what old people are like. So I really appreciate both of your perspectives on that. And so much what we're trying to teach students is that aging is a very complicated and different for everyone, and so many moments of joy and growth and potential. So I appreciate that. I had pulled out of the reading something that Lyn had written, which was all of the ages we have ever been live inside of us. And I thought that both of your books really, brought that to the fore. So can you say a little bit more about what that means to you?
Well, I think for me, when I wrote it, is that, every year that you live, it's like a bank account. You're collecting experiences. You might get ahead some years. You might have losses other years. But that it's a vast reservoir of resources that you have to draw upon. And I think what's really interesting, I've been involved in a process the last year. This seemed to happen since I hit 70, where I've been revisiting things from my past, but I have an entirely different take than when I was actually experiencing them. And, I went to therapy and I really thought I worked them through, but they've been coming back in a very different way. And so I think I'm looking back at things that happened when I was a child, when I was 20. And you see that all of these things have remained a part of you and are always available to you to both reflect on and to learn and to grow from.
Yeah, and I'll say I know that I embody so many different ages that I've been, and I often picture myself at different ages as I'm walking around the world, and I've learned through this Oldster questionnaire that everyone else pretty much feels the same way. And the poet and memoirist Maggie Smith said it best in her Oldster questionnaire. She said, that she feels like nesting dolls. And she feels like she is, a set of nesting dolls with all the different versions of herself. And then there was someone else who took it who said that they felt like a haunted house. That felt a little bit like, negative. So I'm going to stick with Maggie Smith's, yeah.
Okay, so as you're reflecting on your lives, and when you talk about being true to yourself in daily life, what does that require? And how does it look now as opposed to the 20s and 30s? And looking back, you've kind of already reflected on that, but just day to day, how can you really be true to yourself? How do you embody that? That was planned, by the way. No, not really.
Well, I think, I think for me, and I was talking about this recently, is that I've had a very long professional career as a social worker, and through that process, for which I am quite grateful, I learned to have an ethical code, and I learned to have a set of values. And so I think one of the things that I discovered when I was being a fashion blogger and an influencer is there are no ethics, there are no values. And so it took me a while, but I sort of went back and recovered those ethics and values that I had lived many more years doing. And so I think, to me, being true to myself is, am I really living the way that I'm telling people I'm living, that I'm living the things I believe in? And is it really, really an authentic life? And I can really tell the difference now. And I think part of the concern with social media is it can trick you into thinking you're living an authentic life, but you're really not. And so that was, you know, I feel like now I've been through that experience and I've sort of refigured out or recovered. I'm in recovery. And it just feels, I feel whole and integrated. So I think that's the answer to your question.
I, as I talk about in my book, I've always felt just a little bit different from everybody else in just a litany of ways. And I developed this almost like tick where whenever I have an instinct that I want to do something, I try to override it with, well, what would a normal person do? And what has changed as I've gotten older and after I wrote the book is that I pause. The instinct is still there. Everything I want to do, I first shoot it down inside myself. What? That's crazy. What? No, not a normal person would not do that. Do not do that. And then I have to fight with myself to give myself permission to do the thing that was instinctual for me. And what I have learned is that when I am true to myself, when I really follow my curiosity and my true instincts, I succeed. Yep. And there is still a part of me that shoots down every instinct. And now I can laugh at myself, but I know now that I need to build in time between getting the idea and giving myself permission to do it. And I laugh at myself. I'm like, oh, here I go again, you know, telling myself it's a bad idea when I kind of know it's a good one, just because it's not what a normal person would do. So I've never felt normal.
Great, thank you. Actually, this is sort of a Lyn question, so I'm sorry. I'm a social worker, so I'm very interested in just, you know, this whole social worker to fashionista to media influencer, and you had a few thoughts in the lobby that I was very interested in hearing more about your journey from one to the other.
Well, I think I think what people didn't know is that I started doing that in 2014. Until 2019, I was still teaching full-time in a school of social work. And the other thing, even when I stopped that, I was working as a consultant on social work grants. So I never stopped being a social worker, but I think again, part of what I love the most about being a social worker is that it's a very generalist knowledge base. It pulls from many different fields. And so I was sort of using fashion as a lens to look at society, to look at how we perceived age, and really was doing a kind of public social work, but I was using something that people don't consider traditional social work. And people used to ask me all the time, social work, fashion, but there's issues of sustainability. There's workforce issues. There's so many social justice issues that really are embedded in the fashion system that it wasn't that much of a leap for me to just take a field that, was not taught in the social work curriculum, but gave me a medium to talk about something that if I wrote an article in a social work journal, maybe 400 people would read. But now there were millions of people having a conversation in 2014 about age, and an older woman being in this field of young. So I felt like in the beginning it was something that I kind of changed the narrative. As time went on, it's a very commodified system, so you get sucked into it. But I think in that very beginning moments, there were not images of women with gray hair in social media, in fashion, and young people found this remarkable. And in the early days, most of my followers were young, and they would write to me and say, oh, you're making me not afraid to be old because I'm like 30 and I haven't done this and I haven't done this and I haven't done this. And so, wow, I don't have to do everything before I'm 30. So a lot of younger people wrote and said, you're making me not afraid to be old. And that felt really good at the time. And a lot of older women wrote to me and said, I feel seen for the first time ever. And that felt really good. So I think I was doing a form of social work because it's in your bones. And also, I had 40 years experience of engaging people. And that's what makes you successful on social media, is you really need to know how to engage. So I don't think if I wasn't a social worker, I would have been successful at doing what I did.
Thank you. I feel like, can we keep that for our recruitment spiel? Vicki, can we get that on tape?
Okay, follow-up question. So with your journalism background, so you taught here, right? You told me?
I did. I taught here in 2010 and 2011 in the journalism department, yeah.
So that's great. So, okay, so if related to that, so for someone who feels like a misfit or late bloomer, what is one concrete thing they can try to start moving forward with authenticity, and how does teaching, leading, your experience kind of empower your narrative, your messaging? How does that help with your journalistic background and your Oldster blog and magazine, which is really fabulous, by the way?
I think that one of the reasons I wanted to become a journalist, and some of the things I did as a journalist, I did because I felt different from everyone else. One of the reasons I started Oldster is because I wanted to know that I wasn't the only one having the feelings I was having about getting older. I wanted to find out what everybody else thought, which is also why I went into journalism. I also, being in journalism allowed me to go places where I would have otherwise felt uncomfortable and like an outsider with my reporter's notebook and sometimes a camera around my neck. So it let me be in those spaces in a context that made me feel less uncomfortable. I spent some time as a gossip reporter, which is so far from like my values and what I care about. But I got stuck in this rut of trade magazines, and I worked at Fairchild Publications in the 90s. And Fairchild had all these trade publications, but they also had Women's Wear Daily and W. And my entree, what was going to make the bridge for me from writing about like, you know, drapes and shoes to writing about actual human beings was to be willing to be on the gossip beat. And so that was fascinating for me because I was a shy person. I was a person who didn't drink, didn't go to nightclubs, and suddenly there I was at nightclubs with a reporter's notebook and a photographer at my side. So I had, you know, I was there in an official capacity, observing people do wild things, snorting coke in bathrooms, you know, taking off their clothes. I mean, just wild things. And it helped me sort of make sense of the world that I'm a part of, but always felt to the side of. So being a journalist allowed, and being a teacher, teaching this to kids, it allowed me to kind of just find a way to explore the world without exposing myself too much. Yeah, it was really interesting. And I enjoyed teaching here. It was good. It was great to inspire kids to do the same kind of work.
Okay, who wants to hear more about the gossip beat? I do.
But one thing about Sari, and I would recommend to social work students who are interested in this field, that they do read Oldster. And Sari has another feature called Ask a Sober Oldster.
I do. I have
And it has a lot of incredibly wonderful information about recovery, about addiction, about sobriety, and just sort of how that works over a lifespan.
Yeah, I have a monthly series called Ask a Sober Oldster, and it is a collaboration with another wonderful newsletter called The Small Bow, which is an addiction and recovery newsletter. And we've had, just this month, we had Elizabeth Gilbert, we've had Rick Moody, Nick Flynn, Margaret Cho. We've had a really wonderful lineup of Lori Wolliver, great lineup of people who are in recovery writing about. The reason we came up with this collaboration with the Small Bow was that the Small Bow celebrates a certain kind of longevity in recovery, and Oldster celebrates a different kind of longevity, you know, longevity in life. And it just seemed like a really good partnership, and it has been. We've done like 28 of them.
Yeah, I definitely have to second I love the Oldster, especially I think you have a lot of people who talk about getting old, but they might be 30 or 80 or any, you know, as we all are getting older.
I'm 60 and 11. And 15 and 35, you know.
That's great. I think we're at about the halfway mark, and I think we wanted to see if there were people here that were interested in asking questions, and I think we have a mic somewhere. Yep, oh, there she is.
Great, if you raise your hand, I can bring this around.
Does anybody
Who
have?
wants to be the first question?
Okay. Yay, we've got questions down here. I didn't realize with the lights on, we've got people up in our balconies up there.
Who raised their hand? Okay.
Hi, Lynn. I was wondering, you know, when you said that you were now having a different take on things that were memories that you had from childhood, I was wondering if is it possible that I was wondering, would you consider that maybe it's because now you've written a memoir? Do you think that writing the memoir had an effect on your memories? Like, have you done a lot of writing? I know you had the influencing, but was it about yourself, or, I haven't read your book yet, so I don't know. Did you write about your childhood in your book? I don't know.
Not a little peripherally because of the influence of my mother and grandmother, and the book is really 10 years of my life, the decade of my 60s, when this was happening to me. And so you see me going into it in the beginning, and then you see me coming out of it at the end, experiencing the decline and death of my mother, moving outside the city, becoming having grandchildren. So it really is, more like a chronology of what happened to me over that period of time. How it was helpful to me is that in the later part of doing the influencer thing, I really was not as self-reflective as I normally am. And so I really needed to process this whole experience, because I have to tell you, what happened to me, it was mind-blowing. It was something that I didn't ask for, I didn't expect, and it just kind of happened. And so I really needed time and distance from it to really reflect. I've written probably every day of my life since I could write, because I have journals. And I wrote all the time, not for publication necessarily, but for my own thinking and process. I do write on a Substack called Dispatches from the Shed. But the memoir, I think, it did give me the time and space to reflect on that experience and to kind of see what was great about it, what was not so great, how did I come through it. It really helped me to process my mother's death, to be quite frank, more than even the accidental icon thing. And sort of my new life, which is really, really different. So yes, I think memoir is a great device to sort of help you revisit. And I feel like now in my 70s, like the insights I'm having are pretty dramatic and interesting and amazing, compared to when I first looked at these things younger in life. It's a much deeper dive into these core experiences that I had. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Can you pass this down to the center?
I was thinking of just yelling, but in my oddness, I have a couple of questions to ask. The first one is, does humor play a role in your journey, in what you're doing, and in fact, in your coping skills? And second, were there anybody in your life that was sort of a role model for where you are now?
Is that for both of us or one of us?
Take it away. It was not designed for just one of you.
As I was writing my book, initially I was very fraught. I was very anxious about revealing myself and revealing other people. It was only after I wrote a really ugly first draft that no one was going to be allowed to see, and I got a little distance from it, that I was then able to go back and realize how funny it was. That's part of my writing process. I always know I have a thing to say. I'm anxious about if I'm going to say it right, and then I go back and I funny it up. because it is funny. You know, life is hilarious. As I've gotten older, I've found role models. The writer Anne Lamott feels like a role model to me. She's very irreverent, and she questions things, and she's willing to put herself on the page. She's like a big role model. And then I have like aging role models, like Patti Smith is an aging role model to me. I like the women who, no matter how old they get, you can see the little girl in them. And I'd like to be like that, you know, no matter how old I get. I want it to be evident that there's a little girl inside of me who's still very much alive, and she's probably laughing through the whole thing. Yeah.
I think I can't conceive going through aging without a sense of humor. And I think, you know, my partner and I will, you know, have some cognitively dissonant moment. And we kind of look at each other and we just have to laugh, right? Because, you know, and we'll say, old man, old woman. I have always loved humor and used it as a defense or to help me get through life. So I really can't imagine, you know, not having that in my toolbox as I'm getting older. I think one of the things, and I'm thinking about this more and more in my writing, is that there's a lot of writing now by women who are premenopausal, menopausal, and there are a very few writers who are writing 70, 80, 90. And so I think that that's really important because we need guides. And I think that we are doing aging differently. My generation was, you know, burning bras, and I think we're thinking about aging differently, but we need kind of guides. So I'm always trying to seek out authors like Abigail Thomas is a great one. Alice Elliott Dark wrote just a beautiful novel, Friendship Point. She told me that her next novel, the protagonist is 90. So I think for me, because I am a writer and a reader, primarily a reader, that I'm always looking for older persons who are showing me what's coming next. I think the journals of May Sarton I've also looked at. So I think I look for it in literature, and I really hope that more older people take advantage of all of these memoir writing classes or even fiction writing classes, because I think we need our voices. And again, particularly 70s, 80s, 90s, because as I said, a lot of young women, they're writing about a lot of things we didn't dare talk about. We didn't dare share. We whispered them to each other as women. And so I think we need to have older folks really trying to put more good writing about what it's like. And not just an idealized view, the reality view too.
Good evening. I have a comment that I hope will culminate into a question. I'm 56, right? And I've recently launched my only child to college. And unfortunately, I've also lost both my parents within an 18-month span. But I'm finding that I'm at the time in my life where I'm like, I'm living a life for me. It's no longer about my daughter or my parents or my husband, and really leaning into this aging and a confidence, right? Especially as a woman of color, right? So I'm just wondering if there were any culminating events for you that led into you really embracing aging, or was this a mindset that you've always had across your lifespan?
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry for all of your loss. It's profound. But I can also see how it's liberating. And the way you phrased it, that you get to live for you now. I've had a few contributors to Oldster who have had similar situations, and they've embraced this opportunity to live for themselves. I mean, on the flip side of that is, something that I worry so much about, because I don't have children, is who's going to take care of me when I'm older, and probably nobody, and so but that's also making me have to think about, like, well, how can I prepare for the later years? It's forcing me to have to be creative. I keep joking that I'm going to start Oldster Manor for Gen Xers who forgot to have kids, or like an old age home where we have like punk rock shows and everybody lives in a cool loft, But what was the second part of the question? Oh. So this is very interesting. I have been obsessed with what it means to get older since I was 10 years old. And the reason is, well, there are two reasons. One is, and I've been dining out on this story for a long time, ever since I started Oldster, but it's the truth. At my 10-year-old birthday party at Long Beach Bowl on Long Island, my uncle arrived and he said to me, "Wow, you'll never be one digit again." And I was like, oh my God, a whole big thing happened that I didn't know, and I don't get to go back the other way, and oh my God, how many more of these are there? How many more of these portals am I gonna go through, whether I want to or not? And I can't turn back. It began this obsession with milestones and am I on track? I also was always doing things either earlier than my peers or behind my peers. I was never in step with my peers. And so I was very self-aware of, well, this person's 12 and she has her period, and I'm 12 and I don't have my period. I became like hyper aware of who was doing what when. And now I interview people about it just so I can find out, like literally that's where this came from. So, but then when I was in my mid-50s, I had a job at a website called Longreads. I had been there for 5 years. Some wonky stuff started happening and I left as kind of like a whistleblower. I was 54. And I thought, I'm going to go get another job. And then I went out there, and digital media and publishing are tanking, and we're already tanking in 2020. But also, I was 54, and I couldn't get interviews, couldn't get a second interview. People were saying really, like, they were giving me backhanded compliments, like, I'm surprised a legend like you would be interested in a job like this. Like, that's legend being code for old person. And so suddenly my fascination with getting older and what it means became urgent. And that's when I started Oldster. I had a dream one night that I started a magazine called Oldster. I got up and I made a joke about it on Twitter, talk about sense of humor. And then I realized, oh wait, actually this is kind of a great idea. So, and now I've got like 70,000 subscribers. So it was a good idea.
I think just my response is, I think similar to your experience, that the loss of my mother just opened up a big space in my life that I left empty. And that was the hard part, leaving it empty until I could find myself in it. So I think loss is a crisis and an opportunity.
Here I am. So in your reflections and in your writings and your observations, are there differences and or similarities between getting older for men and getting older for women? We have an audience here, the majority of women, I think, and you four are women and you're well experienced and so far wonderful things to tell us all. But in your professional careers and, as I said, observations and writings and reflections, tell us about what you think about the differences between men and women as we grow older.
Well, it's been really important to me that Oldster magazine is not just for women, and most aging-related media is for women. It's women over 40, women over 50, and I love, there are podcasts that I love, there are magazines that I love, but I did not want to create a silo because I wanted men to know what women are going through, and I also wanted women to know what men are going through. The same way that I feature people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, because I want people of I want intergenerational conversations about what people's experiences are, so that we can have this, that's how we all understand each other's humanity and how we also understand our own experiences. What I am learning is that it's not as different as you'd expect. I think that it is a little bit easier for men because there is a thing called gendered ageism, and I did a piece for a magazine called Yes about gendered ageism in Hollywood, and how there was beginning to be a bit of a backlash with some TV shows and movies representing women as sexual beings after 50. But I'm also discovering that, men are really thinking about this. I just did a piece about men and hair and aging, and men wrote in about how hard it was for them when they started losing their hair. And some of them embraced it, and some of them, started hiding or wearing hats. Or I also wrote a piece. I wrote a piece of my own a couple months ago called "All the Young Dudes," and it's about. I had a boyfriend he was an alcoholic, and when he would get drunk, he would tease me, and this was in my early 30s. He would say, "When we get older, you're going to stop being attractive to men, and I'm going to still be able to get women, and they're even young ones." And this has been on a loop in my head all these years later. Things don't leave my head very easily, as you can probably tell. And then I had this experience last winter where I went to this restaurant in the East Village called Superiority Burger before I was doing a book event, and a 27-year-old tried to pick me up. And in the back of it was wonderful. It was so great. It felt like the universe sent this guy here to just completely obliterate that stupid message that has been on loop for 25 years in my head. And this literally, I was sitting at the bar at this wonderful place, Superiority Burger. So, you sit at the bar and you just, you talk to whoever's sitting next to you. And he just, I was like, is this guy flirting with me? It was dark. Maybe he couldn't see I have gray hair and a wrinkly neck and a wedding band. And I just let him go, and I joined him, and I was like, oh, this is great. It's fun. What does it matter if he's flirting? And then at the end, he said, oh, I got to go, but can I get your number? And I said, well, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of old. I said, I'm 59. And he was like, what? I said, I was born in 1965. And he said, my parents were born in 1964 and 1966. I said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 27. He said, I was born in 1998. And I said, in 1998, I was traipsing around this neighborhood with a string of Peter Pans. And I did not bother to ask him whether he knew what a Peter Pan was. And I'm sure you all do. And then, of course, I went to the book event, and I couldn't stop saying to everybody, a 27-year-old just tried to pick me up. But also, it was a really nice conversation. Here was a person who saw me as a person. it didn't occur to him that I was out of his age range or not interesting or invisible. That's the word that so many older women use or are told they are. Like, no, we're not invisible. Maybe to some people, but forget those people.
Man, now I really want to know what a Peter Pan is, but I think we'll skip that one for now.
Well, I think
A Peter Pan is like,
an endless boy.
they're like men that never grow up, and this is what they wear. They wear Chuck Taylors, 501s, and really worn out concert t-shirts with a blazer. That's like the Peter Pan uniform. All over the East Village.
So not to be a bummer about those, but if you get underneath all the social constructions of who we're supposed to be, whether you're a man, a woman, whatever your identification, you're an aging body. And that body has things happen to it. And I think I've been through an experience recently where I've been very close to a man who's had to face a loss of strength, other sorts of things that much of his identity had been built around, and is as vulnerable as a woman who is worried about her boobs hanging to her knees or whatever. Aging affects your body. Your body changes no matter who you are. And in my experience, having brothers and a partner, that people have worries about this. They have concerns about this. And I think that's our commonality. If we take away all the things society says we should be or do.
Yeah. I heard that some days you wake up and you're listening to the Rolling Stones and you feel like you're 25 again, and I'm kind of jealous. And I'm curious, is there any way that we can hold on to those moments longer or experience more of them so that way we can age as graceful as we can?
Do the things that give you joy and always did your whole life. Music really can transport you to a time. It's a writing prompt that I use in writing workshops, like what is the song that brings you back to another time, and what is that time? And yeah, music is just as Lyn said, she hears the Rolling Stones, she's 25. That's whatever it does, whatever brings you joy and brings you back to those times, do it all the time, whenever you can.
Ditto.
All right, is there one final question, or I can have them wrap up? Okay. Hold on. Yeah, hold on.
Get the mic for you.
Just so everyone can hear.
Sometimes as you're getting older, people want to put you in a box. And you don't supposed to do certain things. Oh, you don't supposed to dance anymore. You don't supposed to do this, or you don't supposed to dress like that anymore. You're supposed to do this and that, and you feel like wow, I'm different, so I'm not going to do that. So, you feel alienated half the time because you're not getting older like they want you to get older. And it's like, you're in your own little bubble, in your own little world. So how do you deal with that thing when people say, okay, you old, so you need to sit down?
So
Get the rocking chair. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to get the rocking chair. I fight against it all the time. Never ending.
yes. If you fight it, it makes them fight back. So one of the devices I use is I like to use questions. So I'll give you an example. I had to go to urgent care to get I think it was a COVID test or something. And it was a nurse, and the nurse says to me, is there someone at home who can help you get online to see the results? And so I said, instead of getting furious and saying, you know what, I said, I'm really curious, what made you think to ask me that question? And it did stop them dead in their tracks. And they had to think about it. Like, where am I getting this idea about you from? And so I think, why do you need to see me sitting in a rocking chair? Why do you need that version of me? Because it is their version. It is not your version. And so I think sometimes we're just silent when the doctor is talking to your daughter instead of looking at you. We need to say, hello, I'm here. I'm in the room. And again, challenging people when they have a version of us that is not about us. Because I think if you really said, why do you need to see me in a rocking chair? Wouldn't you rather see me dance? Because otherwise I'm in the grave. So I think really us not being silent, and again, when you say, oh, I'm not going to do that, whatever, they just say, oh, they're being difficult again. You know, we always have to make them do the right thing. I think we have to ask a question. And I've found that to be very effective.
That's a great story. That is such a great story. For me, I just feel like I'm constantly fighting ageism everywhere I go. Assumptions about me, assumptions about my magazine, dismissal. I'm not getting the kind of coverage I feel like my work deserves. And so it's always a constant battle for me to call attention to what I'm doing. And I'm just going to keep doing it because I feel like it's really important. And yeah.
I think me choosing the title of my book probably lost me a good many sales because people put it in a box and a category. But I felt it was important to take that word, which people misuse so badly, and to really put it out in the world. Like, I'm old. That's good. Because the alternative is not good.
Well, with the word oldster, most people get that I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but there is a very famous actor who was going to take the sober oldster questionnaire, who is in his 80s, who said he refused because he wouldn't do anything with which the word oldster was associated. And I was like, well, you don't get it. You don't have a sense of humor. You don't get it, and I don't need you.
All right, I think we're about out of time, and I just have to say this has been so much fun. Really, can we give them all another hand? Thank you.